You're at the register, cart full. You tap your card, and for exactly 1 second, you don't know if it's going to go through. It does. But that 1 second, that's not just embarrassing. That's your entire financial life compressed into a single moment of helplessness. And if you felt that even once you already know what I'm about to say is real, there's a number that makes that feeling disappear. Not $1 million, not even 100,000. The number is $10,000. And what it actually does to your brain, to your decisions, to the way you move through your entire life, most people don't see coming until they're already on the other side of it. That's what we're getting into today. Not how to get rich, how to stop being afraid. Let me start with something nobody wants to admit out loud. Living without savings isn't just stressful. It's cognitively expensive. When your brain perceives scarcity, real scarcity, like running close to zero, every month, it shifts into a mode where all your mental bandwidth gets consumed by the immediate problem. Pay the rent, cover the bill, make it to Friday. That's the whole horizon. And the brutal part, that's exactly when you need to think clearly about the future. And it's exactly when you can't. Here's what that actually looks like. You get an email about a certification program. Real credential companies actively recruit for it, could move your career forward by years. Cost $2,000. You open it, you read it, you close it. Not because the investment isn't worth it, it obviously is, but because you can't afford to even seriously consider it. The option doesn't feel real. It feels like reading about someone else's life. That's not just a money problem, that's a thinking problem. And $10,000 is what fixes it. Now here's where most people get this completely wrong. They think the power of $10,000 is what you can spend it on. Fix the car, cover the emergency, handle the medical bill, and yes, that's real. Most financial emergencies that derail average Americans cost less than $5,000. $10,000 in savings puts you above the waterline for almost anything a single bad year can throw at you. But that's not the main event. The main event is what $10,000 does to you when you're not spending it, when it's just sitting there, untouched. There's a concept called the security effect, and it's probably the most underrated idea in personal finance. The money you never touch is doing more work than the money you spend, because every single day it's quietly telling your nervous system you're okay. You have options. You can think. And options change everything. But I'll get back to exactly how in a minute, because first I need to tell you something I don't talk about much. There was a period in my life where my entire financial strategy was hoping nothing broke. That was it. That was the plan. I wasn't living recklessly, wasn't buying things I didn't need. I was just running so close to zero every single month that one unexpected bill would have been genuinely catastrophic. I remember checking my account balance before buying groceries, not glancing, actually calculating whether the cart was going to work out. I remember turning down opportunities that had any upfront cost, even small ones, because I couldn't absorb any risk whatsoever. I remember the specific exhaustion of making 40 or 50 small financial calculations every single day just to stay even. What I didn't see at the time couldn't see was how much of my thinking that was burning. I wasn't just broke. I was mentally constrained in a way I didn't even recognize until I got out of it. The day I crossed $10,000 in savings wasn't dramatic. Nothing changed on the outside, but something shifted internally that I still find hard to describe. The closest I can get is this: I stopped playing defense. For the first time in years, I could actually think about next month instead of just surviving this one. And here's what that unlocked, because this is the part most people never connect. Here's something that sounds small, but isn't. When you're running close to zero, your brain makes a calculation every single time you spend money. Generic pasta or name brand, pack lunch or buy it, drive across town to save $12, or just pay the extra. These feel like tiny decisions, but you're making versions of them 30-40 times a day. And by evening, you're exhausted. Not from your job, from the math, from the constant grinding invisible tax of managing scarcity. Now here's what nobody tells you about that exhaustion. It doesn't stay in your wallet. It follows you into your relationships, into your sleep, into your patience at work, into every conversation where you're half present because the other half of your brain is still running numbers. Financial stress is not a money problem that occasionally affects your life. It's a whole life problem that occasionally involves money. And here's the thing I want you to sit with for a second, because the next part genuinely surprised me when I first understood it. $10,000 doesn't just reduce that exhaustion. It eliminates an entirely different category of problem that most people don't even know they have. I'll show you what I mean. When you have zero savings, your brain treats every dollar like it might be your last, so you avoid risk. You avoid anything with an upfront cost, even when the return is obvious. You stay in the bad job because you can't afford the gap between positions. You stay in the overpriced apartment because moving costs money you don't have. You skip the networking dinner because $50 feels like a lot when you're running on empty. But the person with $10,000 saved, they go to the dinner, they meet someone, they get offered a role that pays $6,000 more per year, not because they're smarter, not because they got lucky, because they could afford the $50 bet. That's the real compound effect of savings, and it has nothing to do with interest rates. Think about what it means to negotiate your salary when you genuinely don't need the job, or to walk away from a bad offer because you can afford to wait 2 more weeks for a better one, or to push back at work, pitch the idea, ask for the promotion, say the thing everyone's thinking, because even if things got uncomfortable, you'd survive it. That's not confidence in the motivational poster sense. That's structural confidence, built on a real foundation, the kind other people feel in a room before you say a single word. And that confidence compounds in ways that are almost impossible to trace back to the original source, which is $10,000 sitting quietly in an account you barely think about. Now let's talk about how you actually get there, because this is where most advice goes completely wrong. The standard line is cut your spending, automate your savings, stay consistent. And look, the math is real. The average American spends somewhere around $3,000 a year on coffee, food delivery, and purchases that didn't really need to happen. Redirect even a third of that, and you're at $10,000 in under 3 years. But here's what the math misses. Saving is not primarily a math problem. It's an identity problem. Most people approach saving like a crash diet. Restrict everything aggressively for 60 days, hit a wall, fall off completely, feel like a failure, start over 6 months later. This is why the majority of people who try to build savings end up exactly where they started. Not because they're bad with money, but because they're trying to change behavior without changing how they see themselves. The people who actually reach $10,000 and stay there made a quieter shift. They stopped asking how much can I cut this month and started asking what kind of person am I becoming. That question leads somewhere completely different. It leads to noticing things. The subscription you forgot about, the insurance you haven't requoted in 2 years, the phone plan that's $150 more expensive than it needs to be. Not because you're hunting for cuts, but because someone who's paying attention naturally sees what someone who's just surviving never does. And the compounding here is behavioral, not just financial. Saving your first $1,000 is hard. Real friction, real sacrifice, constant second guessing. Your second $1,000 is noticeably easier. By the time you're pushing toward $8,000 or $9,000, the habits are mostly automatic. The identity has solidified. The new version of you is just how you operate now. Here's the reframe I want to leave you with. And this is the part I think changes everything. $10,000 in savings is not a financial milestone. It's a proof of concept. It proves in the only language that actually matters, which is results, that you are someone who can build money, not inherit it, not stumble into it, build it deliberately, consistently, over time. And that proof permanently changes what you believe is possible for yourself. You probably know someone pulling 6 figures who's always stressed about money. Nice apartment, new car, no cushion. 1 bad month away from real trouble. And you might know someone else making $45,000 a year who has quietly, steadily built a real financial foundation and moves through life with a kind of calm that has nothing to do with how much they earn. The gap between those two people isn't income. It's one thing, the habit of keeping money. And $10,000 is where you prove to yourself permanently that you have it. After that, the next $10,000 is a completely different problem. Not easier exactly, but different. Solvable in a way it didn't feel before, because now you have evidence. And evidence is the only thing that permanently changes what you think you're capable of. So if you're looking at a savings account that's closer to 0 than 10,000 right now, here's what I want you to actually take from this. Don't try to save $10,000. That number's too big to feel real when you're starting from scratch. Instead, try to save 1 month of expenses. Just one. Whatever that number is for you, 1 month. Because 1 month of savings is what prevents a single bad week from becoming a financial catastrophe. And once you have 1 month, you build toward 3. And 3 months in, that's roughly where the shift I described starts to kick in. The goal isn't the number. The goal is the version of you that exists on the other side of it. That version doesn't check their balance before buying groceries, doesn't feel their stomach drop when something breaks, doesn't close the email about the opportunity they can't afford to consider. That version thinks forward, makes decisions from strength instead of fear. and carries a kind of quiet confidence that has almost nothing to do with how much money they earn and everything to do with what they decided to keep. If you want to see what happens next, what actually changes when you go from 10,000 to 50,000, that's the next video, because the shift that happens there is just as surprising. And most people never see it coming either.